Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody. Welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for Wednesday, March the 8th, episode number 1173. Go ahead, jump in the chat box, sponsored by Nana's Porch. Nana's Porch is a full-service catering company in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area, specializing in banquets, corporate events, golf tournaments, weddings, including that whole hog barbecue for a big old splash party in your backyard. You name it, they can do it. Nana's Porch was voted top 3 for food trailers in the local newspaper poll, and their pimento cheese, good, voted the best cheese product in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Food Association. Go and check out my good friend Chris Payne in Nana's Porch at nanasporch.com. All right, in just a couple of minutes, we will be joined by John Whittle from the Big Spur batting leadoff today on the program. We'll take a deep dive into Gamecock Baseball, the hot start, the power surge, the win over Clemson. But in the grand scheme of things, what does it all mean? So what? Now what? We'll get into all of that and much, much more with John Whittle. Then at the bottom of the hour, second half of the show, we will be joined by Emily Adams of the Greenville News to talk women's basketball. We'll take a look back at the Gamecocks capturing their 7th SEC tournament championship in the last 9 years and look ahead to Selection Sunday and who some potential roadblocks could be in the Gamecocks' quest for a season of perfection. First, a couple of news and notes. Gamecock Baseball stayed hot coming off of that series win over the Tigers, taking down the Citadel last night, 8-1. 4 more home runs for the Gamecocks in the victory. Ethan Petrie and Will McGillis went back-to-back in the second inning. Gavin Cassis added a 2-run shot in the 7th. And then Jonathan French added a solo shot in the 8th inning. Eli Jones picked up the win. 5 hits, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts, and no walks in 5 innings pitched. Freshman Eli Jersenbeck continues to dominate on the mound, going 3 hitless innings in relief, striking out 4, and then Nick Proctor struck out the side in the 9th for the Gamecocks. Baseball team will be back at home tonight against USC Upstate at Founders Park. First pitch set for 6:30 p.m., and that will be streamed on ESPN Plus. And I'm sure at some point there'll be a Mark Ryan tweet talking about how many upstate fans are there, and they're outnumbering the Gamecocks. Men's basketball, they will take on Ole Miss tonight in the opening round of the SEC tournament, 7 p.m. on the SEC network. Alyssa Lang on the call with Damian Fishback. And then one women's basketball note, Zia Cook named a finalist for the Dawn Staley Award. All right, let's go out to what looks like a beautiful outdoor venue and bring in our good friend John Whittle from the Big Spur. John, how's it going? It looks like a beautiful sunny day in the capital city.
It is. It is a beautiful day out here, and reason why I'm out here right behind me is the Old Roost Complex, and over in that direction is South Carolina's tennis center. So outdoor tennis courts. The men's team is just getting started against Ohio State, ranked number 4 in the country. South Carolina's men's tennis team is ranked number 5, highest ranking ever. So I figured I'd come over here for a little bit, see what's happening before heading up to Spartanburg where am I going? Greenville for the game tonight.
So the Old Roost, man, if that building could talk. The statutes of limitations have probably passed on some.
We got it all down there. We got the Rice building over here in the Doty, and there is the tennis center. So that's what we got going on around here today.
All right. Well, Gamecock Baseball has got a hot start going on right now, John. 12-1 on the season, fresh off that season series victory over Clemson, taking 2 out of 3. And especially after the way it started on Friday night, I'm sure there was much angst and consternation on the message boards, but the Gamecocks bats finally wake up on Saturday, and then Sunday in another beautiful afternoon in the capital city. Gamecocks dominant 7-1. And so just your thoughts on that series and how important it was that for Mark Kingston early in this season.
Yeah, my internet connection went out there for just a second, but yeah, it did start out poorly on that Friday night, and there were problems on the bit here and there, and even the first few innings of the game on Saturday. But this team has some character. They've got some fight to them, and they got some talent as well. So, they were able to come back and play really good baseball down the stretch. Really, really thought they did a lot of good things, especially on the mound. And it's certainly a huge deal for Mark Kingston and the team as a whole to get off to a series win against Clemson, because the first couple of weeks of competition weren't all that great. Penn is going to be a very good series win at the end of the season. And I know that it's hard for folks to see that right now. They just see Ivy League school Penn and think they're not very good, and that's fine. I get it. UMass Lowell's not a good team. So you go out and you start. I guess South Carolina was 10-0 or 9-0 going into that Clemson series, and folks think it's 9-0 against bad competition. So to be able to win 2 out of 3 and play pretty well overall for those final 2 games, I think was big in terms of confidence amongst, like, internally amongst the players and coaches, but also give the fan base a little bit of confidence too that, maybe this team is going to be all right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about Will Sanders. Obviously, he did not pitch in the fall. They shut him down. They're ramping him up slowly. And so any concerns at this point? And then do you think they're just really ramping him up and getting him ready to where he'll be able to be at full strength when SEC play gets around?
I mean, I can't say there's zero concern. I would say it's little concern. There's a lot more to be a little bit apprehensive about, more so than Will Sanders. Yeah, he didn't pitch it all this fall. He didn't pitch it all last fall either, and that ended up working out okay. He was all right. So, they I thought that I think that he's gotten a little bit better each time out, but it's mainly been fastball command with him, and not necessarily being out of the strike zone, but where he's putting the ball within the strike zone. So, that hasn't been quite as sharp as what you would, where you would want him to be. But he's going to come along. They're going to get him right. He's too good to not be a great pitcher over the course of the season.
No doubt about it. Well, I mean, look, this pitching staff, even without him being in top form, I mean, you look at James Hicks, Noah Hall, Jack Mahoney, those guys have been lights out. Just talk about them and the quality starts and innings that this team has gotten from them thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could keep naming names if you wanted to. There have been a lot of guys down there who have been really good. I mean, James Hicks, I think, is the one you circle who has been probably the best and most important guy outside of those starting pitchers. James is pitched 4 times now and totaled, I can't remember the number of innings, 15 or so, without giving up a run. And, he made it look so easy against Clemson. It just came in and, Jack Mahoney had guys on base for most of that game, and he was working out of trouble and throwing a lot of high stress pitches. James Hicks didn't. He didn't let guys on base. It was very easy for him out there and really quieted that game down. Took the air out of the balloon, so to speak, for the Tigers. So, I thought he was really important. But there have been a lot of guys out of the bullpen who have been really good. But Noah Hall pitches with such emotion. He's just a great college pitcher. Some folks want to go ahead and make changes to the rotation and move guys around, and you may be asking about that up next. But that's not something I'm ready to necessarily do just yet, just because guys are still getting their arms right and into midseason form. That's not only Will Sanders, but that's Noah Hall and Jack Mahoney too. Like they're still on pretty consistent pitch counts, and being early in the season, you want the weather to warm up, and you want to get a little bit deeper in and feel good about things. But South Carolina's got 4 Thursday, Friday, Saturday series this year. So there's going to be opportunity to move some things around if you want to, without having to move guys up a day and back a day and changing things a lot. So you could see maybe even a James Hicks pitch on a Thursday, and then Will Sanders go on Friday and Noah Hall Saturday, and use Jack Mahoney out of the bullpen perhaps, or in some other capacity. And then the next week, then you have James Hicks and Will Sanders and Noah Hall, and you can change things around a little bit more easily going that way without having to tax too many guys and give them fewer days rest or what have you. So there's going to be opportunities, in the not too distant future to make changes if that's what you really want to do.
All right, so there are some other guys that definitely warrant mention, and that's a pair of Eli's, Eli Jersenbeck and Eli Jones, and then not to mention also Cade Austin, Chris Veach, and Matthew Becker. Becker's kind of had a couple of tough circumstances, probably deserved a better fate, but just talk about these guys, and in particular Eli Jones and Eli Jersenbeck, and just what they've meant to this staff. And maybe, could Jersenbeck enter the conversation as a weekend starter at some point?
Yeah, with Jersenbeck, there's so many different things that he can do. I feel like this pitching staff is going to evolve a lot over the course of the year. And you've got a bunch of guys, and you listed a few there, who are like better starters perhaps than relievers. Like you got guys like James Hicks, Eli Jersenbeck, Eli Jones, Matthew Becker, who can all be really good starters. And you got to figure out which one of those guys can be best out of the bullpen to make the pieces kind of work and fit the best, right? So, and make your pitching staff as good as it can be. So, Hicks has done a really nice job out of the bullpen. Becker has in the past, but Beck, he could be one of those guys who could pitch like James Hicks did and come in and throw 3 or 4 innings. And if the end of the game happens, the end of the game happens. Or he could be a ninth inning, 1 inning closer type. He could also be a midweek or weekend starter, perhaps, if things shake out right. Like, there's so many different things that he can do because he's so talented. But it's about figuring out, how the pieces best fit, and that's going to happen over the course of the season. So, he's the one that's most intriguing. Eli Jones, I think, is really good. He hasn't been quite as sharp as some of these other guys right here at the start of the season, but he's got a lot of movement and sink on his fastball, and he'll get ground balls, and he'll typically keep his pitch count down. So I really like him as a role on this staff. But we know what Cade Austin is, we know what Matthew Becker is, because we saw them both so much last year out of the bullpen. But with Chris Veach, he's got 2 saves so far and looked decent doing them. It was a little bit shaky closing it out against Clemson. So that makes you a little bit apprehensive, I guess. But, he came in and when he needed to get those outs, he got the outs. So got a little bit closer than you'd like. But when that tying run got on base, he locked in. So, I don't know that he's going to be the 9th inning closer guy the entire year, but he's going to be an option. He's done it before at Presbyterian. He's looked good a couple of times here doing it. He's also a guy coming off of surgery, so he may not be a guy who's ready to go back-to-back days just yet. But there's a role for him too. Like they're piecing it together, and I do suspect that it evolves a little bit over the course of the season.
No doubt. Well, certainly it's been a power surge for this team. 36 home runs thus far. I mean, you got 6 guys that are still batting over 300. I mean, you look at some of the numbers. Ethan Petrie, 462, 6 home runs, 17 RBIs, a 949 slugging percentage. Of course, you expected Braylon Wimmer to do what he's doing. 422, 4 home runs, 2 doubles, a triples. He's having a great year. You keep going down the list. You look at Caleb Denny, 6 doubles, a triple, 2 homers, 20 RBIs. And then, Gavin Cassis, 8 home runs, 18 RBIs, a 907 slugging percentage. And Cole Messina at 306, 5 homers, 21 RBIs. And, Will McGillis, he's hitting 261, but he's got 6 homers as well. I mean, this team is definitely hitting early in the season.
Yeah, definitely hitting for power. You look at I didn't look at the numbers last night after last night's game in terms of offensive SEC standings. I know going into last night's game, South Carolina was 10th in the SEC in batting average. And, it's still early to look at statistics. And, competition has varied quite a bit between the level of competition that teams have played. So, it doesn't tell everything, but South Carolina's done a tremendous job hitting for power. That home run total isn't going to keep up. South Carolina's faced a weak pitching staff opening weekend in UMass Lowell, and the conditions have been very favorable at Founders Park to getting some balls out of the yard. But, it's been a solid start offensively. The numbers are going to come down some. I don't think this is going to be a team offensively that finishes higher than maybe 7th or so in the SEC when you look at offensive production. But you know what? If they end up being around mid-pack and in terms of runs scored, then, with this pitching staff, that's going to be good enough to be really good this season. So, the challenge is going to be to stay around mid-pack in terms of run production. But I'm not 100% sure that they're going to be able to sustain that level throughout SEC play. But we'll see. They've got a chance. They've got some older guys. They've got some experience guys who have a lot of collegiate at bats under their belt. They've got some raw power too. So I like where things stand right now. Heading into the last weekend of non-conference play and one more kind of get right weekend before this really gets going with SEC play.
All right, so let's talk about, or is it too early to talk about the impact of Monty Lee on this team? What have you seen thus far with the approach at the plate, his influence in the dugout, and just what he's added to this program coming back in this year?
Yeah, with Monty, he's similar to Chad Kaye in a lot of ways. It's not a drastic change in style from last year to this year, which is good. Both of them believe in working the middle of the field and staying up the middle, working the back, back alley. I do feel like that's helpful to keep that same sort of approach. Now Kaye was a little bit more aggressive early in counts and wanting guys to be aggressive at the plate, right? Like there weren't a lot of strikeouts last year. South Carolina was, I think, second in the SEC in terms of fewest amount of strikeouts in league play. So, those guys were swinging early and weren't always making great contact, obviously, because the batting average numbers were low, but strikeouts were down. The walk totals weren't very high either. But neither was batting average. Monty is more of a plate discipline kind of guy and doesn't want anybody swinging out of the zone. And, especially against Clemson, you saw that they were working pitchers deep into counts. And that was a point of emphasis was to drive up those pitch counts and get those starters out early because Clemson didn't have much depth in the bullpen. Well, they did a great job of that. Sunday, Clemson's bullpen and starting pitcher were down quite a bit in terms of talent level, and they were a little bit more aggressive. I think it was 8 out of the 10 hits that South Carolina had came in the first 3 pitches of their at-bats. So they did a lot more in terms of being a little bit aggressive. So, they've done a decent job of setting a standard that they want and a plate approach that they want that can be altered a little bit based on, what they're facing. So, so that's kind of some of what Monty has brought in and how it's maybe a little bit different from last year. But, he also knows what this is all about around here. And I say that not only to say the University of South Carolina, but the state of South Carolina. And he's been so deep into this for so long, like he knows what it means. And even though Mark Kingston and his staff have been around here for 6 years, they may not have that exact same sense of the way Monty has it. So Scott Wingo have been able to bring some of that in. Scott's been here a couple years now, obviously, but I think that's important. He understands what it means. He understands how to handle things. He understands the university. I think it's been great.
Awesome. All right. So through 13 games, obviously a lot of positives, but John, what is on the to-do list for this team before they get into SEC play where it really counts?
There are a few things, and I don't know that it's all going to be solved by SEC play. But there are a couple of places I've kind of identified that could evolve and could see some changes and just kind of need some improvement. And, South Carolina doesn't have a leadoff hitter. That's a problem with the offense. And that's something that we kind of knew coming in to this season. Like, coming out of the fall, Evan Stone and Dylan Brewer were both awesome offensively. Evan based on his early results, but he led the team in batting average in the fall. That's 40 at bats. That's not a small sample size. So he had done a great job. If they were setting a starting lineup coming out of the fall, he'd be hitting leadoff, and he's obviously not anywhere near that right now. But him and Dylan Brewer, who obviously hasn't performed great so far either, those were your two main leadoff candidates. And then, they're not playing. And Carson Hornig, he provides a great at bat, but he's very atypical, and he's off to a slow start too. So, what do you do at leadoff? We've seen them try different guys. A lot of it hasn't looked quite right. So that's something that you might want to kind of figure.
All right, John has frozen up. Hopefully he will unfreeze.
It just hasn't been a real clean defensive start to this season. And some of these guys can play better, but you look at Ethan Petrie, excuse me, at right field, Talmadge LaCroix at third base. Those are guys who hardly practiced at those spots in preseason scrimmages or even just in practice. So those guys are still seeing balls, off the bat, and getting every rep they get is helping them. So they're far from finished products, and those are guys specifically that I expect to get better with more reps over the course of the year. But South Carolina's had some trouble defensively, and some of that needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
All right, so as we sit here on March the 8th, and sounds like the train is rolling by.
Yeah, you may hear a little train here for a few minutes. I'll try to talk loud.
Hey, that's okay. Saturday, I was umpiring a baseball game, and it was a scene out of Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor, with the Hackensack Bulls and the New York Yankees, all the way down to the uniforms in that movie, in the 3-inning exhibition. Looking ahead to the SEC, to the schedule, as we sit here on March the 8th, how daunting is the schedule, or how would you kind of compare it to maybe the last couple of years, just looking at how teams have performed thus far?
Yeah, Missouri looks a little bit better than maybe folks thought. Mississippi State, I think folks thought would be ready to take a step back up a little bit this year. That doesn't look to be the case at this early juncture. Some of your biggest series are at home. Like it sets up fairly decently. Like you're when you're in the SEC in baseball, you're always going to be playing a lot of highly ranked teams, a lot of good teams. So, there's years when it sets up a little bit better, some that it sets up a little bit worse, but it's always going to be challenging. So, this year it might set up a little bit better than usual for the Gamecocks. I mean, obviously, LSU rotates on, and they're the number one team in the country, and that's not helpful, right? But some of the other teams that you face might be okay. You might be getting them at the right time, like a Mississippi State, for example. So, it's Ole Miss rotates off. They're really good. So, I mean, that's beneficial. But, I think it's going to be about as manageable as you can ask for.
All right. So, I hate to bring up the name, not one of your favorite people, but a Will Muschampism. So what? Now what? All right. So you've gotten off to this hot start. You're 13, or you're 12-1 through 13 games. You have beaten Clemson. It looks like you're going to have a really great record going into SEC play, but that's really what's going to be the determining factor for this team. I mean, how good can they be? What's the ceiling? We'll just start with that.
Yeah, coming into this year, I predicted South Carolina's SEC record to be 16-14, and I don't know that I've seen enough to make me want to change that too much. To be honest with you, I mean I considered South Carolina's pitching staff pretty elite. I I like what I've seen out of South Carolina's offense. I don't think is necessarily going to be good enough to warrant, being a 18, 19, 20 win SEC team. Maybe it does become an 18 win team. I mean, I can see that being a possibility, but that's not something I'm ready to go to yet. I think there's some swing and miss in South Carolina from an offensive standpoint. I don't think the power numbers are going to keep up. There's still some challenges in that order. Not these SEC teams aren't going to hit as many guys as these other teams have hit and walked the amount that these other teams have walked. So, that's going to make some things a challenge. But at the same time, like Carson Horning's the best hitter on this team. Like I probably seem like an idiot for saying that because I think he's back below 200, but he's the best hitter on the team. And if you get him back hitting 370, which I think he can hit, then that helps your offense. So that'll make up for some guys who may fall off a little bit. Dylan Brewer, Evan Stone. If you get one of those two guys going, then that's going to help the offense a little bit. So maybe it does turn into a higher win SEC total than this. But you know what? If you win 16 games in the SEC, if you win 17 games in the SEC, that's not a banner hanging type of season, but it's a good SEC season, and it puts you in position to perhaps host a regional. It puts you in position to be in great position going into the NCAA tournament. So, I think that would be a solid mark.
All right. So obviously this is a critical year for Mark Kingston, for his program at South Carolina, and for his future at South Carolina. And look, it's going to be a long season. There are going to be twists and turns. But if this team stays healthy, what do you think will have to be done by the end of the season for Mark Kingston to be able to maintain his role as head coach of the Gamecocks moving forward?
Yeah, I mean that's a really difficult question to answer because, I mean, what if it's hard to put Omaha or bust on this team or on Mark Kingston. What if South Carolina turns in a season like Tennessee had when they ran roughshod through the SEC, and then Notre Dame comes in and upsets them in the Super Regional? Like, is that going to get Mark Kingston fired? Probably not. If they go 14-16 in the league and are the last team into the NCAA tournament like Ole Miss was last year, like, are they going to fire him and have Monty coach the NCAA tournament because it's another year sub 500? Well, Ole Miss ran through the whole thing and won the whole thing last year. Like, is really difficult to put an absolute mark on it. It's not. If we were able to do it last year a little bit with Frank Martin, right? Because NCAA tournament or bust. Like, the NCAA tournament should be a really good standard for South Carolina basketball, right? Like, that's an easy mark to draw at that point in his career. South Carolina baseball's expectations are higher than just making the NCAA tournament. It's higher than just going to a regional. If South Carolina's a 2 or a 3 seed and bows out in 2 or 3 games of the NCAA tournament, like, I don't think that's going to keep Mark Kingston around next year. But I also can't say, if he makes a super regional, he's absolutely back or absolutely fired one way or the other. But it's got to look a lot better than it has. I think there are ways to make the NCAA tournament and still not be back, and ways to make the NCAA tournament and be back. So, it's really hard to put the same kind of mark like we put on Frank Martin last year. But I do think it's going to have to look really good in some capacity for Mark Kingston this year to be able to come back for a 7th.
All right. Well, hey, John, great stuff as always. Can't thank you enough. Go enjoy some Gamecock tennis and the beautiful afternoon in Columbia. And we will look forward to catching up with you again down the road.
Absolutely, Keith. Appreciate you having me on. Always good to talk with you.
All right. That is John Whittle from thebigspur.com. When we come back, we will be joined by Emily Adams from the Greenville News to talk Gamecock women's basketball. We'll take a look back on the SEC tournament and look ahead to Selection Sunday and talk a bunch about this team and their quest for the season of perfection.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock Baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter @KAllset or follow the show on Twitter @GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, let's go ahead and welcome in our second favorite Philadelphia Eagle fan. We'll say tied for number one. Emily
Hey, I haven't
Adams.
won any national championships. I think that's all right. I'll take second.
All right. Well, nonetheless, Emily, great to have you back on with us. And how was your experience at the Well this past weekend with the Gamecocks doing something that not even the late, great Pat Summitt ever accomplished at Tennessee, which is win 7 SEC tournaments in 9 seasons?
Yeah, other than our weather delay for the wind blowing open the roof, other than that, it was a great experience. The atmosphere was really cool. We had, Championship Sunday. It was pretty close to a full house. I think the attendance ended up being around 12,000. And obviously they set an attendance record overall across the 4 days of the tournament, which is obviously great to see, that still growing. But yeah, it was, a lot of great games. There really was not a bad game to be seen for much of the weekend. Everything was very competitive. It was, I had a great time.
Awesome. So yeah, that was kind of scary. I guess, was it the LSU Georgia game that got delayed, right? Because tornado and weather is kind of reminiscent of a long time ago in the Georgia Dome, when they had to shut that thing down because the roof, the weather blew it in. There was rain everywhere. Fortunately, though, the weather, moved out and basketball resumed, and the Gamecocks stayed red hot. They averaged winning by 24 points per game over the course of the weekend. And they start off with the boat 93-66 boat racing of Arkansas. Then they absolutely rolled Ole Miss, a team that had taken them to overtime just the week before, 80-51. And I really thought the end of that game was one of the cooler moments because Dawn Staley took out the starters and you had all the young players that don't get to play a lot. And they outscored Ole Miss 10-0 to end that game. And every basket, they showed the South Carolina bench and the starters and the veterans just going nuts, cheering for their teammates. I mean, you just don't see that everywhere. I mean, just speak to that and the, that part of the culture and just the closeness and just how close-knit this team is.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually said it while we were at the tournament. Sanaya Fagan is my favorite player to watch on the bench. She is an absolute riot as just like a cheerleader for them when they're on the court. And yeah, I mean, you can really see it, I think, especially with those seniors. They want to leave this program in good hands. They want to leave this program in a place where it's set up to succeed. And so they want to see those young players get those opportunities, especially in situations like that where, they're experiencing that kind of environment for the first time. They're experiencing the grind of a tournament style, college play for the first time. They're experiencing the emotional intensity of, playing for a championship, playing in a win or go home scenario for the first time. So I think that's really valuable for those players, to watch what this, senior class is doing and has done, and B, to get, that little taste of it themselves while they still have that guidance and that support around them to sort of put them in a good place going into next year when there will be a lot of resetting that has to happen.
All right. So in that Arkansas game, I don't think anybody had Victoria Saxton leading the team with 19 points on their bingo card. But it was really great for her. Her minutes are down. She's kind of a glue player. She does the dirty job. She rebounds, she hustles, she dives on the floor for loose balls. She's a great offensive rebounder. She blocks shots. But obviously she does have some limitations, but just speak to the game she had, and not just 8 for 10 from the field, but also 3 of 3 from the free throw line and 19 points in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those games where somebody got going and kept going. I think, we saw that the next day too with Letitia Mehier. There were a few of those throughout this weekend where just somebody hit a hot streak and Dawn let them cook and it paid off. Victoria, it just really felt like a situation where she just sort of had Arkansas's number. Like, I mean, there was no real explanation for it. It was just every shot she took was going in. And that was really cool. It was cool because the team, I think, was very aware of how high that number was for her. Like, it tied her career high against an SEC opponent. She was 2 points away from tying her overall career high. And, Aaliyah was like, yeah, we were all talking about it on the bench, even though she didn't know it was coming, but we were all talking about it. So, that was just a really cool kind of moment for her to cap off this year on, even if, she doesn't get there again in the tournament or whatnot. That was sort of her shining moment. And for LA too, really had that in both games. Honestly, LA had an incredible weekend all around, but that second game against Ole Miss was really sort of her shining moment. And she had the same thing, just could not miss a shot to save her life. And it was really cool to watch some of those players who have not been the big impact players this year have those breakouts, in such a big moment like that. And I think that's obviously something that bodes really well when you look ahead to something like the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, so let's talk about LA, because it's no secret she's one of my all-time favorite players at South Carolina. I mean, how can you not appreciate her, the maturity, the young lady that she has grown into, through tough times, losses in her family, overcoming injuries in the early part of her career. But she goes for 16 points in the second half against Arkansas. 6 of 13 from the field, 4 of 4, 5 rebounds in 15 minutes. And then against Ole Miss, 17 points, 7 of 10, 3 of 5 from the line, 6 rebounds and 7 assists. And then even on Championship Sunday, she didn't have the numbers necessarily, but her contributions on defense, and there was one clip in particular, right, where Tennessee was trying to get her in a ball screen, and she just refused to allow the ball screen to happen like 3 different times. I mean, she's really a Swiss Army knife, and I think she is an X factor for South Carolina in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and she had some nasty blocks this weekend too. I mean, just some real bully plays. I mean, it was just really fun to watch. She's been like she's always consistent, but hasn't been flashy. She hadn't had that breakout this year. She hadn't, been playing a ton of minutes, but was always just sort of that little anchor piece off the bench. Dawn always puts her in with that group of Camilla and Raven. I think because Camilla and Raven can be a little bit more erratic, I think LA has been sort of the stabilizing force of that trio when they check in. And we really just got to see her shine this weekend. I think it was one of those things where it just, South Carolina's played all these teams before. They all had seen what the Stars can do. And they weren't accounting for a Letitia Amiher to break out like that, for a Victoria Saxton to break out like that. I mean, it's that adage Kelly Harper gave, right after South Carolina played Tennessee, we don't need a non-shooter to become a shooter. And that's exactly what happened in both of those first 2 games. And you saw how it ended up in the scoring margin. I just think, yeah, everyone is peaking at the right time right now. And that is where you want to be at this point in the season.
Well, I mean, clearly, you look at it, you take Aaliyah Boston or Victoria Saxton out. Maybe you leave in Boston at 6'5", and then you bring in 6'7" Camila Cardoso, who was in double figures in all 3 games.
Yeah. She had a great weekend
14, too. 14 against Arkansas, 12 against Ole Miss, and then 13 on Championship Sunday against Tennessee, and just really unstoppable at times, and really, really good from the free throw line as well, which is critical and something good to see, because kind of coming down the stretch of the regular season, the Gamecocks faltered in the month of February from the free throw line, but they kind of got their groove back in the SEC tournament, which I think is important. But I mean, what a luxury is it to have a player like Camila Cardoso, who would be starting for every other team in the country? I mean, hell, even Gino would have to start her, right? I mean, sorry, Stanford, you're putting somebody on the bench for her, and she accepts her role because I think she wants to win, and I think she knows what's still ahead for her. But just speak to her performances over the weekend and how valuable of a piece she is for South Carolina.
Yeah, and I mean, she'll certainly start next year. You have to assume, but I think honestly, using her off the bench has been super effective for them because she is so big and is such an X factor, and can kind of do so much, especially offensively for them, that when you start with that lineup that is so consistent, that group of seniors that have always kind of anchored everything down, they get into their rhythm. As soon as they start to slip, you see Camilla goes to the table. It's every time the other team goes on a run, you see a couple of missed layups, Camilla's at the table, she checks in, and it flips a switch every time. It's that group, Camilla, Breezy, Raven, LA have been calling themselves the Energizers all season. And I really think that's what she is. She forces teams to adjust in such a drastic way that is really, really difficult to do, in game without taking a timeout. And I think that's what's made her such an effective weapon off of the bench, especially. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes next year, assuming that she is in that starting lineup, if that, alters the way that teams will handle her. But I think that's the other thing, is just no one can handle her. I mean, she doesn't have to jump to block you half the time. She doesn't have to jump to get the rebounds. I mean, she's just there, and there's no one in the SEC with height to match that. There's very few teams in the country with height to match that, really. I mean, you look at Stanford, I think is probably the only one that can legitimately match Aaliyah and Camilla at the same time. There's not too many others with that, level of talent at that size. There's, plenty of bigs that still can't hang with Aaliyah and Camilla, just because, they don't have the agility, they don't have the footwork, they don't have, I think something Camilla's gotten a lot better with this season is just, having that effort on the boards, having the, those little intangible things. I think she's taken a huge jump even from where she was in November to where she is now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she has an uncanny ability to catch the ball and at difficult angles, get the shot to go. And then her free throw shooting, I think, has really been a big factor for South Carolina, with her, getting offensive rebounds, going up, getting fouled, and then going to the free throw line and making teams pay instead of going 3 for 8 or 4 for 8. She's going 6 for 6, 6 for 8, 5 for 7, 6 of 7, which makes a big difference. So obviously there was an injury. Kira Fletcher goes out early in that second round game. Raven Johnson comes in and plays a lot. They tried to go back with Fletcher for a few minutes. I think Dawn Staley figured out, hey, look, we need you for the final 6 games. We're not going to really need you this weekend. We're going to roll. We got this. And so they shut her down. Raven Johnson comes in. She really pushes the tempo, right? I think it's a great yin-yang situation, kind of a two-headed monster they have, because each has their own style of play. But sometimes it is scary because Raven is going wide freaking open, and you see those passes and you just hope, oh my God, I hope they're looking and I hope they can catch it. But against Tennessee, she played 38 minutes on Championship Sunday, which is 2 more minutes than she played against UConn.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it seems like, based on everything we've heard, that Fletch will be okay come tournament time. Dawn said post-game after Tennessee that she was staying in Columbia this week during spring break to rehab, and, they're expecting her to be good. And, again, it's not as though they'll really need her in those first 2 rounds either, most likely. So I think she should have plenty of time to be healthy, by the time those really important matchups come around. But losing her, I think, is definitely a blow, especially just because Raven isn't used to playing 40 minutes a game. Obviously, has done it a couple of times this year, is certainly not incapable of doing it, but being able to get her those little rests, being able to have that rotation that they've gotten so used to, I think, losing that is always going to throw things off a little bit. And yeah, it's Raven's skill set is incredible, but it's not the best matchup for every team. I think having Kiera gives them the ability to lean on whatever their opponent is giving them. I think that's one of the biggest weapons the depth gives this team in general, is that they can just sort of answer to whatever's being thrown at them. So without Kiera, you obviously lose some of that, especially having that be a point guard, having that be, such a tone setting thing. And Raven played great against Tennessee. Raven always, plays well. But yeah, I think getting Kiera back will be very, very important for them come tournament time. I think that is a weapon that they really need for some of those matchups.
I mean, her mid-range game has been really good, kind of comparable to Destiny Henderson. I think she's really good pulling up off the dribble in the mid-range.
Yeah.
She's also, been a very dependable catch and shoot shooter, even from beyond the arc. I think she's back. Like, she's got her legs under her. The game has slowed down, after missing all of last season and, ramping up slowly this season. And so I do agree. I think she's critical. I mean, we got to talk about maybe the most underrated player on the team. I mean, everybody knows about her defense. She's finally getting recognized for that. Bree Beal, first team all defense, on the list for Defensive National Player of the Year. But her offense has really helped catapult South Carolina and force teams to play them more honestly, which has opened it up for the post players inside.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I am like the number one Bree Beal fan on the beat. I just, I'm a big valuer of defense in general. That's always been every sport that I played growing up. I was a defender. That is always, just something that I have prioritized when watching sports, when covering sports. It's something I look for. And I mean, Bree just does it all. And I think even when her offensive numbers aren't there, I mean, she led the team in assists, I think, in the Ole Miss game. I mean, she just does a little bit of everything all the time. And having a player like that is so rare, and especially a player that does it with the consistency that she does it. I mean, I don't think she's had a game without impactful stats. Even in, she's had plenty of 0-point games this year. And if you look at her stat line, she played more minutes than anyone on the team. She had, however many assists, however many steals, however many blocks, held whoever to, 5 points below their average. Just there is no area of the game that she doesn't impact for them. And she makes mistakes so rarely. And I think that's one of the most impressive things about her. Like, she is almost never going to hurt you as when you have her on the court. And I think that's why we see, Dawn will leave her out there longer than Aaliyah, longer than Zaya a lot of the time. She is usually the last one to come out from that starting lineup. And I mean, I just, I've voted her onto every all SEC anything that I've voted for this offseason. I think even though as her recognition's going up, I don't think her impact is observed enough. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to observe if you're not watching every single game that a team plays. I'm not going to fault a Big Ten writer for not, knowing every minute of every game that Bree Beal's played in. But for me, watching this team constantly, I mean, she is just enormous. I mean, she does everything for them.
And in that tournament, Bree Beal, 4 of 7 from downtown. And really shot the ball extremely well. You can see the confidence growing. It's just not the corner threes now. Yeah. One of those was, a couple feet beyond the arc at the top of the key, and she just let it fly. Her free throw shooting has been better. And so there's only one question left to ask about Bree Beal. So longest lashes in the SEC, Angel Reese or Bree Beal, and who wears them better?
It's a good question. I think Bree's might be longer than Angel's. Although when Tamari Key was playing, Tamari Key might have had Bree beat. Tamari's got good ones too. But Angel actually lost some lashes during one of those games. I think during the Georgia game, she lost half an eye. And during that rain break got him back on. But yeah, they were on display this weekend. But I think I want to say Bree's got him longer than Angel right now.
Well, there you have it. So LSU didn't make it to championship Sunday. You had made the bold prediction for Georgia. Maybe we'll say the weather screwed that up for you. Look, I gotta be the first to admit, on Saturday, so on Friday I worked like 4 baseball games back to back to back to back. Saturday, I got up, more baseball games. I come home, get something to eat. I did have 2 ice cold Corona Premiers with the salted rim. And I was so exhausted. It was like, 22-10, LSU at the end of the first quarter. And I'm like, I think I'm going to take a nap. I woke up at like 9:30 and I see that Tennessee has come from behind to knock off LSU. And so somebody sent me the screenshot of, or the meme of Kim Mulkey with her multi-zippered pink jacket, crying, squatted down on the sidelines with caption this photo. And my response was, I just forgot it's no longer the 90s and my jacket is out of style.
Yeah, that game was a weird one, to say the least.
I mean, I would have never thought after the first quarter, but I guess Tennessee went to a zone and LSU just kept playing man-to-man. Mulkey said she thought about going to a zone. I think I probably would have at least tried it for a few possessions. But, I mean, hell, she's got 3 national championships. Clearly, she knows what she's doing. But there was just no slowing down Jordy Horston and Rakia Jackson in that game the way LSU was playing them.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that was the thing with that game was, Tennessee has so often, when it gets down, just kind of struggled to get out of that hole. It's either going to be a game where Jordan and Rakia are playing well or a game where they're not. Very much, kind of similar to how I feel about how a lot of Zaya's games have gone this year. I think those two are similar in that they're really high or they're really low. And that was, one of the first times they've really had a dramatic turnaround like that after halftime. I mean, Jordan Horston, I think, had maybe a couple of points at halftime at most of that game, turned it around and ended with, I think she ended up with a double-double in that game. I think her and Jackson both did. It was, I mean, I remember looking at, we were in the back after South Carolina's game because that game went on pretty shortly afterwards. And I had looked at somebody in the back and I was like, this game's over, like halfway through the first quarter. I was like, they're done. And I think that's what everybody thought. I think everyone in that arena like, oh, this is going to be ugly and sad. And then it was very much not that at all. It was maybe the most fun game of the weekend. It was very dramatic. There was a lot of, I don't want to say bad blood, but not, no, there was no love lost between those two programs after what happened the last time they saw each other. There was some spiteful energy in the air. And you could feel that come out, especially after Tennessee won. We saw Rakia Jackson did that little TikTok dance that Angel Reese did in their huddle post game. Jordan Horston was walking around holding up an L. It was fun basketball. It was a pleasure to watch.
All right, so I've got to ask, the controversial call towards the end of the game. It looks like Angel Reese has, drawn a blocking call. She's going to the line for free throws. And then all of a sudden, no, you're not. It's a charge. We're going the other way. I mean, were the Lady Vol fans, did they stick around? Because I know it wasn't looking good at halftime. I don't know if they left or not. I don't know how well LSU traveled. I know the FAMs were out in full force. But what was the crowd like that second half? And then at the end of the game, when that call takes place, not shockingly that there would be a controversial call, because I think a lot of coaches had a lot to say to a lot of different officials over the course of the weekend in that tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where it wasn't an obvious bad call. It was questionable. Like, I think it was one of those that kind of could have gone either way, and it went Tennessee's way. And that's basketball. I think at the end of the day, it wasn't something that they got egregiously wrong, in my opinion. I'm sure LSU fans would disagree, and fair enough. But yeah, Tennessee fans honestly were one of the best fan bases there that weekend. I was at almost every game, helping out with one thing or another, and there were Tennessee fans at every game. I mean, whether Tennessee was in it or not, whether it was the 13 seeds playing each other or whatnot, the Lady Vols fans were there for the weekend to watch some basketball, and they were just always around, always there. You could not go anywhere in Greenville without running into a group of them. So they were very well represented, and they were certainly there for every minute of every Lady Vols game. And then obviously, the South Carolina fans, showed out in big numbers. I think it was the most drastic you could tell, because it felt like there were a lot of Lady Vols fans there all weekend. And then on Championship Sunday, it became very clear there were not that many Lady Vols fans there compared to the South Carolina fans. That was very much a home game atmosphere for them, which I'm sure was really cool, for the players and all of that. But LSU honestly traveled very well as well. Those three fan bases were definitely the most represented. But in that LSU Tennessee game, it was definitely more Tennessee, but not a huge margin. LSU was plenty loud, and that game was loud in general. As that one started coming down to the wire late, it got really into, and that stadium that arena is kind of echoey because it's built like a hockey arena. It's so wide, so you could feel that in your chest towards the end. So it was really cool. It was cool to just see how many people traveled for it. And got to see some really good basketball. I mean, it really did not disappoint. And even those early games, watching on TV, Kentucky and A&M had some really fun ones. So yeah, it was a great tournament. I think anyone who traveled got a good product, regardless of whether your team won or not.
All right, so one name we've yet to talk about, and that was the MVP of the tournament, Aaliyah Boston. Just her consistency of play. But outside of her and Zia Cook, who really didn't have a very good first game, but Cookie definitely heated up and was Cookie Monster against Tennessee, going off in that second quarter. I think Aaliyah Boston scored 10 in the first quarter, and Cook scored 12 of her game-high 24 in the second quarter. But she was just really clutch and hit big-time shots, momentum-changing shots throughout the semifinals and then in the finals. But not everybody, for whatever reason, on the Gamecocks team that probably should have been on the all-SEC tournament team, like Cardoso and LA, I don't think either one of those made it, but a cool moment in the locker room. Aaliyah Boston. I mean, just, man, reason number 937,411 why she's just awesome. She just stands up and talks about her sister, LA, and how they wouldn't have made it there and wouldn't have won it without her, and says you deserve to be on the all-SEC tournament team, and gives her plaque. I mean, that was not staged. That was not just for the cameras. I mean, that was just another genuine moment for what I think is just a band of sisters, this team.
Yeah, and I think especially with that senior class, I mean,
the freshies.
You spend 4 years together, you have no one come or go really from that class in 4 years. It's really unusual. It's especially, it's unusual in the transfer portal era. It's unusual in general just to keep a class that big in the basketball world together like that. And so I think, there's no overstating how close that group are. And I'll say, I mean, I agreed with Aaliyah. I had LA on my all tournament team ballot. I tweeted about this. I thought her impact, over the 3 games was, I mean, arguably the biggest. She just was so consistent for them. She did absolutely everything right. And so that was a really cool moment to see. And I think, I think it was a surprise to those, I know several others who are, South Carolina writers also voted for LA. So I think it was a surprise to us to see her not end up on that team. And so that was a really cool gesture from Aaliyah. And obviously, it's not that she needs any more of those trophies. I don't know. She's going to run out of space pretty soon. After, I'm sure the end of this year comes as well. But yeah, that was, that felt very, very authentic. That was absolutely, I think, something that Aaliyah just decided to do in the moment. And that is just sort of, Aaliyah's always been very gracious like that. I think even you see in her talking about Dawn Staley afterwards and the impact that she's had on her. It was a very celebratory moment for all of them. I felt like there was no, Aaliyah never feels like the star of the show, even when she is. And I think that's part of what makes her so impactful as a leader.
No doubt. So let's look ahead. I mean, there's still the Big 12, they play their conference tournament this weekend, but the madness has already begun. Last weekend, throughout every, particular the Power Fives that played, South Carolina was the only top seed to win the tournament. I mean, Stanford got knocked out in their first game.
As did Utah.
As did Utah. Right, who were the top 2 teams who were at one point both on the one line. Indiana got beat. I mean, Stanford's got 5 losses. Iowa's got 6 losses.
Yeah.
I mean, how are they on the one line? I mean, I know you can say, hey, Stanford, Tara Vanderveer, great roster. But the fact is, they got 6 losses.
Yeah, and I think that's I think I tweeted this after that Pac-12 championship with Wazoo winning it, which everyone saw coming. I think
everyone being no one.
I mean, I was just like, good luck to the committee, because I mean, that's the thing is you go, okay, well, Stanford has 5 losses. How can you make them a 1? UConn has 5 losses. Maryland has 6 losses. Virginia Tech has 4, and the ACC is not nearly as competitive as the Big Ten or the Pac-12 is this year. Utah has 4 losses, but their losses
Iowa with 6.
Teams, it's right. So it's they are, I feel like, in such a difficult position where it's South Carolina and it's the field. I mean, there really is no clear number 2 to me right now. I mean, there's not a clear 2 through 10 almost. So many of those teams are almost interchangeable at this point, which is great for us as fans getting to watch it. It's going to be great for the tournament. I mean, so many of these lower seeds you look at as now, Wazoo is now a huge, upset threat. Southern Cal has beaten Stanford this year, took Wazoo to overtime, both of their games, took Arizona to double overtime. They're a huge upset threat. You even look at an Ole Miss or at a Georgia who, could pull something off with the right matchup. I think there's so much parity this year that we really haven't seen in a very long time. I mean, even when you look at last year, South Carolina was number 1 and Stanford was number 2 the whole year. And those were very clearly, the top 2 teams. As soon as Paige came back, UConn was the clear number 3. And, that was obvious to anyone who had been watching. This year, I think if you asked, 10 different writers who's the second best team right now, you're going to get 10 different answers because there are just so many teams you can make an argument for. But I mean, John Staley says this all the time. I mean, parity is good for the sport. Parity is good for the March Madness of it all. Parity is good for building fan bases. You know, the more teams that are competitive, the better. And so I think we're set up for a really, really fun couple of weeks here in March.
Yeah, I mean, like outside of South Carolina, I mean, you could pull names out of the hat, right? Like, I mean, for me, I would have Indiana because of their overall body of work, despite losing the buzzer beater where Caitlin Clark ran around the arena flexing and posing like they had just won the national championship. I mean, granted, it was a big shot, right? But in Indiana, 16-2 in the league. They won the league in the regular season, 27-3. I mean, undefeated at home. I mean, they've just been really, really consistent. But I like Iowa. I like Maryland. Certainly in that league. I mean, we'll see if Texas can hold chalk this weekend. I kind of think they will. Vic Schaefer, he's kind of right behind Dawn Staley on the toughness factor, and I just think that really matters. Them and Oklahoma are both 14-4 in the Big 12. Iowa State. I mean, it's not a very deep league. Virginia Tech winning, the conference tournament, I think was by default. I think Notre Dame is the best team in that league, but not having Olivia Miles was clearly, very impactful. And so when you look at the latest bracketology, you got South Carolina, Indiana, Stanford, and Virginia Tech moving up onto the one line. And so if Charlie Cream has nailed it in South Carolina's regional, Utah is the 2. Ohio State, who, by the way, got boat raced by Iowa, is the 3. And then a very intriguing 4-5 matchup with North Carolina and Colorado could await. I think Colorado beat Stanford.
Yeah, I believe that is one of theirs. And Tennessee beat Colorado. So, I mean, Colorado's a weird one. And I mean, UNC is a weird one. UNC, I can't decide if they're good or not. I really don't know.
I mean, what happened to them in NC State? I thought, along with Notre Dame, those were the best 3 teams in the league.
Yeah, it's been a weird. I mean, I'll say we differ on Texas. I'm out on the entire Big 12. I don't think anyone in the Big 12 goes past the second round. I don't think any of them are any good. And that's my tournament hot take right now is that I don't think the Big 12 is any good. But I mean, some of those ACC teams are funky and can really stir things up. And those mid-tier Pac teams, I think those are going to be the ones that we're really looking at for those to pull off some of those big upsets. And yeah, I've seen a mix of Virginia Tech, Iowa in that final 1 spot. Maryland was in there for a little while. I think Maryland's a really scary team. South Carolina played them without Diamond Miller, which I think is easy to forget. I had forgotten that, honestly, until a couple weeks ago when I was looking back into some things. And I realized that she hadn't played in that matchup. And I mean, she's been incredible in Big Ten play and in the back half of the year. And I mean, even, outside of South Carolina's bracket, even you look at like UCLA is one of my favorite underdogs. I think UCLA is incredible. I think they're going to be really fun in the tournament. And yeah, I mean, I think Virginia Tech too is capable of making a run. They've had, some of those funky losses this year. They, I think, went down almost to a buzzer beater with Tennessee. But, I like Elizabeth Kitley. I like them as a team. I like kind of they're one of those teams that is hot right now, that goes into the tournament with momentum and has the potential to make a run. So I think there's a lot of interesting sort of possibilities here and sort of scenarios that South Carolina can find itself in.
Yeah, I mean, so who's one team, if you're South Carolina, you're hoping is not in your regional?
I think, I mean, to me, the team that's the scariest is UConn. And UConn looks like it's poised to draw 2 right now, although it seems like they're sending them to the Seattle regional based on everything I've seen. So that's good for South Carolina. I think of the lower seeds, you really don't want to see UCLA. I mean, UCLA is the only team this year that has come into Colonial Life Arena and hung in there. Every one of South Carolina's other big games that has been close: Stanford on the road, Ole Miss on the road, Mississippi State on the road, UConn on the road. The only big game that they've hosted is LSU, and we all saw how that went. So I think, the team that you're scared of if you're South Carolina, especially with, they're going to have that sort of home court advantage in Greenville during the regional round. And obviously we'll host the first 2 rounds. UCLA had their number. And that is not a team that I want to run into again, especially in the madness of March.
All right. So for me, it's Maryland because it is Diamond Miller. I have just such immense respect for Brenna Freeze. I mean, something's off because just the number of transfers. Think about where they would be, with Angel Reese this year, right? Owasu, she transferred to Virginia Tech, and she's not even hardly playing now. She fell out of the rotation when she had an injury, and everybody else has just stepped up. And so, I don't know, maybe it's Virginia Tech, maybe it's Maryland. And so I'll ask you this question. I mean, how many rounds will it go before South Carolina really gets tested?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is matchup dependent. I would not expect to see them be challenged much until the Elite Eight, honestly. I think there's a chance if they draw, certain matchups in the Sweet 16, that one could get interesting. But really, I don't think anyone outside of those top 3 or 4 seeds are going to be able to even, be in the conversation with them. And even some of those, I mean, you look at LSU is going to probably draw 3 at this rate, and South Carolina handled LSU the last time they saw them, so until they start playing 2 and 3 seeds, I don't think anyone is going to be sort of in that stratosphere. And this is not a team historically even that's been upset a lot in the tournament. Outside of that one to Syracuse back in 2016, there haven't been too many others. All of their other earlier round losses have been to teams seated above them. So Dawn Staley is not someone who loses games she shouldn't lose. So I don't see them. I think realistically, probably not until the Final Four, but I think they have a chance to get challenged in the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight, matchup dependent.
So 32-0, 16-0 in the SEC. They ran roughshod through the tournament. 6 games away from a season of perfection. It would be the first undefeated national champion since UConn in 2016, and I think only one of 4 teams to repeat as national champions with an undefeated season. What does that add to the legacy of the Freshies, of Aaliyah Boston, and of Dawn Staley if they're able to pull it off? Yeah,
I mean, I think Dawn said this a couple weeks ago, but if Aaliyah wins us another one, she's in a class of her own over Asia, over everybody, and I think that rings true. I think it's hard to, I think, contextualize how rare it is to go undefeated, especially because so many of us grew up seeing UConn do what they did for so many years. It didn't feel rare for UConn to go undefeated, for them to win back-to-back championships. But it really is. I mean, you look at teams that have gone undefeated. There have been 9 undefeated seasons in the history of NCAA women's basketball, and UConn has 6 of them. There have been 3 other programs that have 1 apiece, and that's it. So it's an incredibly, incredibly unusual accomplishment. And to do it with the back-to-back championships, which is also extremely rare, has also only happened, for 4 programs. One of them was, Southern Cal back in the 80s. I think only Tennessee and UConn in the last couple of decades. So, I mean, to add your name to that list, to the list of Pat Summitt and Gino Auriemma, end of list, is a pretty elite company to keep. I mean, there's not many bars in the sport higher than that. So I think, Dawn Staley cements her legacy as an all-time great. Aaliyah Boston cements her legacy as an all-time great. South Carolina cements itself as an all-time great if they are able to pull this off.
And that will be the last word. Emily Adams, absolutely crushing it as always. That's why we love having you on the show. Tell us what you've got coming up on the Greenville News. Or are you just headed for the beach this weekend?
Unfortunately, not heading for the beach, but do have a little bit of a lighter week, thankfully, with the girls on by. But we'll have plenty of stuff on Selection Sunday, scouting reports and all of that as soon as we see opponents and everything. And then obviously spring football also starts next week. So we'll start having some of that coming up. Just, a couple of things from what we're able to access there. And then first round of the tournament obviously kicks off next week. So it's getting busy here in Columbia.
So are you hoping for, is it like a Friday, Sunday, or Saturday, Monday? Which would be preferable?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, we've been on that Sunday, those Sunday games are kind of in the routine now. So I wouldn't mind keeping that, but the Mondays aren't too bad either, honestly. And then, that gives you some freedom to watch the Sunday games. I'm framing this around which day can I consume the most other games during. So we'll have to see how the schedule shakes out. But yeah, it should be fun.
All right. Well, Emily, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for your great coverage of Gamecock women's basketball for the Greenville News. And have a rest of a fantastic week. Enjoy some downtime. I think you're going to be busy for the next several weeks. And hopefully I'll run into you in Dallas for the Final Four.
Yeah, knock on some wood. That I think, barring disaster, we should be there.
That's right. All right. Thanks again,
Alrighty.
Emily.
Thanks, Keith. Pleasure is all.
Whoops. All right. And so that was Emily Adams popping in and popping out there as I still struggle to become the master of my YouTube domain. But thanks to all of you for listening and watching. And those of you that will watch that didn't watch live, we will be back next Wednesday. Coming up tomorrow and Friday on the pod will be spring football preview. Part 1 tomorrow, we'll be looking at the weapons at the disposal of Dowell Loggins. And then on Friday, we'll follow that up with a look at tight ends, which are weapons. And then the big uglies on the offensive line. So that is what is to come on Gamecock Pod Daily. Tonight, we will have the Garnet and Black Town Hall. Can't wait for that to see a bunch of my favorite Gamecocks and friends. It's really my extended Gamecock family. Love hanging out with those guys and gals on our weekly Zoom call. That's what we call it, the Garnet and Black Town Hall. So it's not too late. Sign up for a VIP membership and join us tonight. The link is on the homepage. So until tomorrow for the patrons and until next week, this has been Gamecock Pod Live. Have a great rest of your day. Go Gamecocks and God bless. I'm out of here.